In this lesson, we'll take a look at how to draw a feather with graphite pencils. Before we get started, let's take a quick look at the materials that we'll be using. Of course, we'll be using graphite pencils, and for this demonstration, I'll use an H, an HB, and a 4B. We'll also be blending some of the graphite into the surface, so we'll be using blending stops. We'll be working on smooth Bristol paper. Of course, if you don't have smooth Bristol paper, any surface will work. We're also going to use erasers to erase some of our initial sketch lines. We'll get started by drawing the stem that goes right down the center of the feather, and this is called the rachis. And in most cases, this rachis is going to curve slightly. We'll use several light sketchy lines to record it on the surface using the H pencil. Then we're going to start looking at the outer contours of the overall shape of the feather. Again, these are going to be loose lines. We're not going to worry about all of the breaks that happen within each barb or within each collection of barbs. Instead, we're going to worry about the overall shape. Once we have the overall shape in place, we'll reinforce the lines that we drew for the rachis. Again, we're still drawing very lightly here with the H pencil. Now, using our overall shape as a guide, we can go back in and define the individual collections of barbs. We know how far out these should go based on the contour line that we drew initially. Again, we're drawing very lightly and loosely here with the H pencil. Once we've defined these sections, we can go back in with a kneaded eraser and lightly erase any of the lines that we no longer need. Now, using an HB pencil, we'll start to work to develop some of the value relationships. In this case, the light source is originating from the lower left corner of the picture plane. This means that on the rachis, there's going to be darker values on the opposite side. So we'll go in and define some of these darker values. Now we can move our attention to developing some of the darker values that happen at the end of the feather. And in this case, the end of the feather, the collections of barbs at the end of the feather, are much darker. They progressively get lighter in value as we get closer to the quill or the lower portion of the rachis. As we progressively develop the values, we're also going to consider the texture, and more importantly, the directional strokes that are made with the graphite pencil. We'll pull these strokes out from the rachis towards the end of the feather. Of course, this will create the illusion of individual barbs. As these applications are made initially with the HB pencil, we can go back with the blending stop and gently blend them in before going back over the top of them with the darker 4B pencil. As we do, we can progressively define more and more each of the individual barbs that exist. You'll notice here on this particular feather, the rachis at the end of the feather is still visible because it's lighter in value. We'll continue this process working down towards the quill or the lower portion of the feather. Again, starting with HB applications, pulling the strokes outward from the rachis towards the end of the collection of barbs. The line that's created here should mimic the overall shape of each collection of barbs. By adjusting the amount of pressure that we place on the pencil, we can leave areas of slightly lighter value in between each one of the lines that we create. Doing this gives the impression of individual barbs, which ultimately will lead to a more representational looking feather. As we lightly blend these applications with the blending stop, we're careful to pull the blending stop in the same direction that we made the graphite pencil applications. Then we can go back with the 4B pencil and darken up some of the values even further. With a sharpened HB pencil, we can again revisit these areas and differentiate the barbs even further. As we work down the feather towards the quill, we're going to progressively make the values lighter. So we'll start with lighter applications of the HB pencil and gently blend these with the blending stop, again following the directional strokes that mimic the overall shape of the collection of barbs. Then again, over the top, we can go back with a sharpened HB pencil and make a few lines to help give the impression of individual barbs. These lines are more concentrated closer to the rachis. Before developing the lower portion of the feather, we'll develop the rest of the upper portion, this time on the opposite side. Again, we'll start with darker applications, putting more pressure on the HB pencil. We'll still be conscious of the directional strokes that we make in this section. In this particular section that we see here, some of the barbs are a little bit looser and there's a bit of space in between them. As you can see here, this is a patient process developing the values and the texture and the directional strokes. It's important to take your time, work very deliberately. You might start with lighter applications and progressively get darker. It's always easier to make an area darker if need be than to try to go back and make it lighter if you accidentally make it too dark initially. An added benefit to patiently layering graphite applications is that we can help to alleviate some of the graphite shine that happens on the surface. Now, to a certain extent, all graphite drawings will have some bit of shine associated with it. It's just the nature of the medium. However, if we patiently layer each application, we help to preserve the tooth or texture of the paper, which can help to reduce the shine. If we started with a darker pencil and put quite a bit of pressure on it initially, we would see that we have a higher level of graphite shine in the final image. But by working slowly, we can alleviate this. Before addressing some of the softer barbs that happen at the base of the feather, we'll go back over the top of the rachis with the blending stop and just define that shadow on the upper portion a little bit further. We'll also clean up some of the sketchy lines that may still be visible with an eraser. Now, the softer barbs that happen at the end of the feather are wispy. They're not quite as rigid as the barbs that happen on the upper portion of the feather. And in this case, these wispy barbs are mostly white, so we're going to create the impression of them by defining some of the shadowed areas around them. And of course, these need to be soft. For this reason, we'll make light applications with the HB pencil and then gently blend them with the blending stop. Now, of course, we don't want our feather to be floating in this case, so we'll need to add a bit of cast shadow. Again, I'll remind you that the light source is originating from the lower left corner. This means the areas of cast shadow are going to exist primarily on the upper right portion behind the feather itself. For these applications, I'll use the H graphite pencil. The H pencil gives me a little bit more control over the transition of value, or the slight transition of value that happens at the end of the cast shadow. You'll notice that the cast shadow is much darker closer to the edge of the feather and progressively gets a bit lighter as the shadow starts to fade. We'll add a bit of cast shadow underneath the quill as well. Now, even on the lower portion of the feather, we'll see a couple of areas of cast shadow. This is only happening underneath a couple of the collections of barbs. Lastly, we'll strengthen the shadow on the rachis, making it appear a bit more raised with the 4B pencil. And now our graphite drawing of a feather is complete. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to the channel? And if you're ready to learn even more, then why not check out our comprehensive membership program, which includes no-nonsense video courses, weekly live lessons, ebooks, lesson plans, and much, much more. Just click on the button in the center of your screen to learn more, or click on the card in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you so much for watching.